Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 7 important articles for a detailed discussion. We have 3 articles which are equally interesting and very important for the mains exam. We have an article related to nuclear energy and financing of nuclear energy plants around the world. We have an article related to the water crisis that the world is going through and how important it is to conserve water on the occasion of World Water Day, which is marked on the 22nd of March every year. Then finally, we have a big development in our neighborhood where Pakistan has conducted airstrikes against Afghanistan. So let's analyze all these mains articles comprehensively and then take a quick look at the smaller articles in today's newspaper which can be relevant for our prelims. So before we start the discussion, if you're liking our initiatives, why don't you support us through your likes, your comments, and without fail, do subscribe to our channel. Also, before we start, I would like to remind you that as part of the upcoming Holi festival, there is a flat 50% discount being offered on our IAS courses along with a 6-month free extension. So you can use the offer to enroll for our online English classroom program, which has just started from 16th of March. So with this, let's get started with the analysis of the Hindu newspaper by looking at this column from page number 10. This article is exploring the potential of nuclear energy to decarbonize the world and to bring down emissions in order to help us deal with climate change. Because just the other day, there is a very important summit which has been held in Europe related to nuclear energy. On the 21st of March, Belgium hosted this important summit. This is the first ever summit called the Nuclear Energy Summit. So some of these topics can be very important for your prelims as well. So Belgium has hosted this summit, which is the Nuclear Energy Summit, in cooperation with the IAEA, or the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is the global agency that deals with the safety and security of nuclear research and nuclear development. So IAEA, in collaboration with Belgium and few countries, they have hosted the first ever nuclear energy summit, and they have also adopted the Nuclear Energy Declaration. India was also one of the participating countries, and India has adopted this declaration as well, along with 31 other countries. So in total, 32 countries have adopted the Nuclear Energy Declaration. So please make a note of this point. As part of the first ever Nuclear Energy Summit that was held at Brussels, the capital of Belgium, 32 participating countries have adopted the Nuclear Energy Declaration, which includes India as well. So this summit is organized along with the International Atomic Energy Agency. And the focus of the summit and the declaration is to use nuclear energy to decarbonize the global economy, to focus on nuclear civilian energy and ensure that we reduce our emissions and rely on nuclear power as compared to other dirty forms of energy, which is usually produced through fossil fuels. And even some renewable forms of energy, they tend to contribute more emissions as compared to nuclear energy. Even if you take solar power, wind power, and other renewables, they still leave behind a higher carbon footprint as compared to nuclear energy. So that is the focus of the Nuclear Energy Summit, to exploit the advantages of nuclear energy to reduce emissions and to decarbonize the world. So it's in this context that this summit was organized and the Nuclear Energy Declaration has been adopted. So as a result of this development, it becomes very important to examine the background, to understand why this summit was organized, what was the initiative that led to the Nuclear Energy Summit. We should also talk about the benefits and advantages of nuclear energy as compared to other forms of energy. So these are some very important points that we need to discuss, and you should also know about IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency. All these are very important points for both your prelims and your mains. So let's look at the background to the Nuclear Energy Summit. See, just a few months ago, COP28, which is the Conference of Parties to the UN Climate Change Convention, was held in Dubai. Dubai hosted the 28th Conference of Parties under the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. So during this climate change summit, many countries had pledged to adopt nuclear energy for the future in order to decarbonize the world and to achieve their net zero targets. As part of climate action efforts, many countries have pledged to become net zero economies in the coming decades. For example, US, even European Union, they've all taken a commitment to achieve net zero targets or net zero emissions by the middle of this century, at least by 2050. Some European countries, they want to achieve net zero emissions by 2045 itself. There are other countries like China and even India, which have pledged net zero targets, but at a later date, from 2060 to 2070. So essentially, overall, the world is moving towards net zero emissions, where we will equate the total emissions with the amount of carbon that is being absorbed and sequestered and stored away from the atmosphere. Because if there is more greenhouse gases, if there is greater concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, that is what leads to global warming. So the goal is to achieve net zero emissions where there is a balance between the total emissions and the amount of greenhouse gases being absorbed, removed, sequestered and stored away from the atmosphere. So in order to achieve this status, many countries will have to work on their energy sources. As we all know, fossil fuel based energy has been the cheapest source of energy, especially thermal power produced through coal power plants and other forms of dirty fossil fuels based on hydrocarbons, from crude oil, petrol, diesel to natural gas. They all contribute greenhouse gas emissions, and there is a need, an urgent need, to move away from these polluting greenhouse gas emitting fuels and adopt more cleaner and renewable forms of energy. So around the world, countries are adopting other forms of renewables like solar energy, wind energy, etc. But even they have a significant carbon footprint. So compared to all other forms of energy, nuclear energy is considered as one of the cleanest and most efficient forms of energy. If countries are looking to truly decarbonize their economies and achieve net zero emissions, there is no other better alternative than nuclear power. So this was clearly recognized and reiterated at COP28. During the Climate Change Summit held in December 2023, several countries, more than 20 countries, they pledged to adopt nuclear energy on a larger scale in order to decarbonize the global economy and achieve the climate action targets. Is that clear? Because recently the global stocktake was undertaken under the Paris Agreement. As part of the Paris Agreement, a global stocktake was carried out, which is nothing but a review of the progress that countries are making, the world is making, towards achieving the targets under Paris Agreement. As per the Global Stocktake Report, which is brought out as part of the Climate Change Convention, the world is way behind the curve and way behind the targets that were brought out under the Paris Agreement. So there is an urgent need to shift away from these dirty fuels and dirty sources of energy and adopt renewable energy, particularly nuclear energy. So a pledge was taken at the Dubai Climate Change Summit to triple nuclear energy capacity by 2050. Around 22 countries came together and they adopted a pledge that by 2050, in the next 2.5 decades, they are going to triple their investments in nuclear energy and ensure that the nuclear capacity will be tripled in the next 25 odd years. It's based on this commitment that the Nuclear Energy Summit was organized. It's because of this commitment made during Climate Change Summit that the Nuclear Energy Summit was organized by Belgium in collaboration with IAEA. So let's understand, why is nuclear energy so significant to decarbonize our economies? As I was mentioning, nuclear energy is one of the cleanest forms of fuel that we know. It emits 4 times less carbon, even when you compare it with other renewables like solar, wind, geothermal energy, and other clean and renewable forms of energy. Forget comparing it with fossil fuels and hydrocarbons. Even when you compare nuclear energy with clean and renewable forms of energy like solar, wind, etc., it emits 4 times less carbon. So it happens to be one of the cleanest sources of energy or cleanest fuel that is known to mankind. So this itself makes nuclear energy the perfect candidate which can help us to decarbonize our economies. And also the IAEA has launched an initiative. The International Atomic Energy Agency has launched a very important initiative called Atoms for Net Zero. This is a program that IAEA has launched called Atoms for Net Zero, where IAEA is taking the leadership role to assist countries around the world to adopt nuclear energy in order to achieve their net zero targets. So it's part of these programs and initiatives that the Nuclear Energy Summit was organized. So it's one of the cleanest forms of fuel that we know. And the best part is that nuclear energy can supply uninterrupted power. Irrespective of geographical constraints, it can provide for uninterrupted power supply. And once the fission reaction is initiated, right, nuclear energy can be very sustainable. It is very efficient compared to other forms of energy. Like, for example, if you look at, let's say, solar energy. Solar energy is not providing you uninterrupted supply. Only during daytime, that too during peak sunlight hours, and that too in specific geographies of the world. Only there solar energy can be efficiently exploited. It can't be done everywhere in the world. Same with wind energy, right? Wind energy can't be exploited, or even geothermal energy can't be exploited in every geography and in every region. There are a lot of restrictions with regard to those forms of clean and renewable energy. But nuclear energy can be established anywhere, and you can even produce uninterrupted power supply and transmit this to other countries as well. And moreover, today, because of advances in nuclear technology, the cost of nuclear power has gone down significantly. There is a significant reduction in the cost required for establishing a nuclear plant. The land required as well is very minimal when you compare it with, let's say, solar or wind power or even other forms of energy sources. If you look at solar farms or wind farms, you need very large land areas that put stress on the land as well. But for establishing a nuclear power plant, you just need a few acres of land and you can make the plant operational. There is a longer life cycle with a nuclear power plant. It can last for several decades. It can provide very clean, uninterrupted power supply, and it will put very little stress on the environment. But of course, there are a lot of risks associated with nuclear energy. That is the reason why the world had not really embraced nuclear sources of energy. Because the fear of a nuclear disaster or an accident or a nuclear leakage or radiation incident had always put the countries and governments and investors away from nuclear power. So this is where IAEA has taken up an initiative. The International Atomic Energy Agency is playing a very big role in the promotion of nuclear energy as a clean energy that can help us decarbonize. So it has launched this program called Atoms for Net Zero program. Please make a note of this. This again could be a prelims question. Now, if you look at IAEA, it is an independent autonomous organization and it reports to the UN General Assembly and UN Security Council. The IAEA is not part of the UN. It's not a UN organ. Please make a note of this. It has been established through its own treaty. But however, it works closely with the UN. It works as part of the UN system that regulates nuclear technology and nuclear research. So it's headquartered in Vienna, in Austria, and its primary mandate is to ensure the safety and security of nuclear material and nuclear technology around the world. It is mandated to ensure the implementation of non-proliferation treaty to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons technology. This is one of the mandates of IAEA. It has powers to carry out inspections, to monitor other countries and review them if they are involved in any nuclear weapons research. It can send a team of IAEA inspectors to countries which are part of the IAEA, and it can review and monitor the safety and security standards being followed at nuclear plants around the world. It can also help other countries in procuring and in sharing nuclear technology for peaceful purposes. So that is the purpose with which IAEA was established. Is that clear? It essentially promotes the safety and security of nuclear technology, and it provides a list of safety standards to be followed as well to make nuclear plants more safe and secure. It reviews nuclear weapons programs. It tries to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons technology and tries to implement the non-proliferation treaty. At the same time, it will assist other countries and help them if they are only interested in nuclear power, in nuclear civilian energy. So India is a member of this organization from 1957. India became a member of the IAEA in 1957, and we are very much part of the safeguards agreement. When India signed the India-US nuclear deal in 2004-2005, we also later adopted the safeguards agreement of IAEA, and now we have separated our military and civilian program. We have opened up our nuclear civilian reactors for IAEA inspections. So this organization, which is responsible for the safety, security of nuclear technology and responsible for promoting peaceful uses of nuclear energy, has launched this important program called Atoms for Net Zero. Through this, IAEA is trying to help all the countries to implement nuclear power plants or to set up nuclear power plants, which is one of the cleanest forms of energy, so that countries can achieve their net zero targets. So please make a note about Atoms for Zero program. It is focused on assisting countries around the world to transition towards net zero emissions by popularizing the adoption of nuclear energy. The goal of IAEA is to ensure that nuclear energy is widely adopted across industries because it's one of the cleanest forms of fuel that we know. So please note down some important statistics as well, which can help you in a mains answer. Currently, nuclear energy accounts for 10% of the world's electricity production. Out of the total electricity produced in the world, 10% of it is coming from nuclear sources. And around 25% of clean energy which is being produced is coming from nuclear sources. These are very important statistics. 10% of the world's electricity is coming from nuclear plants, and 25% of the clean energy being produced in the world is being produced through nuclear sources. The only problem here with regard to expansion of nuclear power plants has been the risks associated with it. So that is why the Nuclear Energy Summit was held, to ensure that the risks are discussed, the risks are set aside, and based on that, financing is arranged to provide adequate capital for the expansion of nuclear plants, for establishment of new nuclear plants around the world, so that we can decarbonize the global economy. So during the Nuclear Energy Summit that was held in Brussels, IAEA and 32 countries have come together to adopt the Nuclear Energy Declaration. So please make a note of this point as well. 32 countries given over here are party to this declaration, and India is also one amongst them. India also participated, and India is also one of the countries which has joined the Nuclear Energy Declaration. Now, as I was mentioning, until now, nuclear energy has not been widely popular, mainly because of the risks associated with it. Just a decade ago, we had a major nuclear disaster in Japan in 2011, which is called the Fukushima nuclear disaster. Following a underwater earthquake and a tsunami, there was a nuclear incident in Fukushima nuclear power plant that led to radiation leakage. So following that incident, around the world, nuclear energy in general became unpopular. Many countries even tried to move away from the nuclear path, like Germany, for example. Germany announced a plan to shut down all nuclear plants. But however, if we have to transition towards a cleaner future and tackle climate change, nuclear energy is one of the solutions. Of course, there are risks associated. We have seen many nuclear disasters in the past as well, be it the Chernobyl accident, the 3 Mile Island incident in the US. There have been many cases of nuclear radiation leakage, which raises concerns and bigger risks, not just for human life, but also for the environment. Because nuclear material, which is fissile, which is radioactive, right? They will have a very long half-life, and they will degrade at a very slow rate over decades and centuries, and they can cause contamination for a prolonged period. So, of course, a lot of safety has to be ensured with regard to nuclear projects, but today this is much more easier due to advancement in technology. Nuclear technology has become much, much safer, right? So today you have something called as small modular reactors. Small modular reactors are becoming very popular, right? This could basically revolutionize the nuclear industry. When we think of a nuclear plant, we think of these large, safe and well-guarded facilities, right? But that may no longer be the case in the future. With small modular reactors, which is as small as the size of a car or a bus, you can set up nuclear reactors anywhere, even in office buildings or in strategic installations. You can set up these small nuclear reactors to power the entire area. Like you set up your diesel generators in almost every building, right? Every city could have its own small modular nuclear reactor that can power the entire city. That is the potential that has come up with small modular reactors. Until now, the sector has been largely controlled by governments. Going forward, we can privatize the sector and promote nuclear startups, nuclear private companies that can invest in the technology and hold them accountable as well. Today, radiation leakage and radiation risk has gone down substantially due to technological advancements. There are better methods today for radiation protection and radiation proofing of a nuclear plant. Even if there is an accident or a disaster, there are methods available to contain the radiation leakage within the contaminated site. There are better utilization of the nuclear fuel with extended life cycles or fuel cycles that will ensure that the plant runs for a longer duration with very minimal nuclear waste. So these are some advantages that have come up as a result of advancements in nuclear science and nuclear research. So this makes nuclear energy one of the safest, and it has a very low risk of accidents as compared to before. So the risk and in general the stigma associated with nuclear accidents had prevented financing for nuclear projects. Now, without adequate financing, adequate capital, how will you expand nuclear plants? If you look at multilateral organizations, multilateral development banks, such as World Bank, for example, right? World Bank provides development financing, and providing loans for energy projects is a primary role of the World Bank. But did you know that World Bank has stopped providing loans for nuclear projects since the 1950s? Over the last 60 plus years, World Bank has not funded not even one nuclear project. The last project it funded was in 1959 in Italy. But after that, due to Cold War geopolitics and the general risks and stigma associated with nuclear energy, World Bank and other multilateral development institutions, they had stayed away from the nuclear sector. They would never give loans or any kind of credit or any kind of financing mechanism to nuclear power projects. So this is the stigma that we have to do away with. In fact, that was the goal of the Nuclear Energy Summit, to bring various governments, private companies, banks and institutions together so that we can mainstream nuclear finance for funding nuclear power projects. As I told you, today nuclear finance can be arranged because the risk has gone down, the stigma is going down due to technological advancements. So it's important to destigmatize the nuclear sector and erase any unnecessary concerns that might exist with regard to nuclear energy. Of course, safety measures have to be taken, precautions have to be taken. If something goes wrong, the ones concerned should be held accountable, they should be held liable to even pay for damages and compensation. Every possible technological measure has to be taken to ensure that it is completely foolproof and accident-free. That is guaranteed. At the same time, we shouldn't allow the stigma and the risks, the perceived risks, to cripple financing, which will cripple the whole industry. So today, as we open up most of the sectors, even the nuclear sector can be opened up for private startups with strict government regulation. And we can bring in capital maybe through multilateral development banks like the World Bank. So these are the solutions which will be considered through the Nuclear Energy Declaration. That's why 32 countries have come together to adopt the declaration at the first ever Nuclear Energy Summit. They will not only promote the sharing of nuclear technology, but they'll try to primarily arrange nuclear finance, maybe through the private markets, through private investors, or through multilateral development banks. So that is what the writer is also talking about. The writer is discussing the need to reassess the risks associated with nuclear power, and there should be more willingness amongst multilateral development banks and financing institutions, be it Asian Development Bank or the new Development Bank of BRICS, the World Bank. These institutions have to come forward to arrange finance to provide the capital that is required. Governments should also deregulate the sector and allow for greater private participation so that they can bring in private capital from private investors. In fact, there are some unique financing models that some countries have experimented with. A few European countries and even South Korea, they have tried with the cooperative financing model. They have brought a group of investors together to create a cooperative model of financing for nuclear projects. This has been a success in many countries. For example, in South Korea, in Russia, even in United Kingdom and France. The cooperative model has worked quite effectively, where a group of investors have come together to raise capital. They will be held accountable for the entire project, for the delivery and safety of the project, and they have successfully implemented nuclear power plants. Another European country, which is a leader in nuclear power, that is Finland, also follows a unique cooperative financing model, which is popularly called the Mankala model. In local Finnish language, this cooperative financing model for nuclear energy is called the Mankala model, where a group of multiple private companies come together to raise funds for nuclear plants. So there are existing models available like this, which can be adopted around the world. So that is what the writer is discussing. The writer is highlighting that arranging for finance through either cooperative model, through the private markets, through private investors, and even through multilateral banks is going to be critical to expand nuclear capacity. The countries have committed to triple the nuclear capacity by 2050. If we have to achieve the goal, the financing problem has to be solved. So now the last question is, where does India stand in this regard? Now, if you look at India's nuclear program, we are largely self-reliant. Our program has been largely indigenous, as we have received very little support from other countries, except for Russia to an extent. No other country has supported India's nuclear program, given the close connection between our civilian program and military weapons program. But of course, now we have come out of this sanctions era. Our nuclear program is widely recognized, and India's clean track record with the nuclear program has been very well acknowledged by most major countries around the world. Today, we have signed civil nuclear agreements with many powers, from US to Japan to Australia, and we are all set to even become a member of nuclear suppliers group, if not for China's objection. So India is in the right position to exploit nuclear energy. And in fact, we have already brought down the cost of nuclear energy in India. If you look at the commercial nuclear plants, let's say in Tarapur, the electricity produced here, the per unit cost of electricity, is already lower than that of solar power tariffs. This highlights the cost efficiency of nuclear energy. If you look at the Kudankulam nuclear plant in coastal Tamil Nadu, which India has established with help of Russia, right? These are Russian nuclear reactors set up at Kudankulam. Even here, the cost of nuclear power has gone down. It's comparable to that of coal-fired thermal power, which is considered usually as the cheapest form of energy. So if we can bring down the cost to this level, then what is the need to rely on coal-based thermal power plants in the future? We can eliminate them sometime in the future and bring down the emissions, decarbonize the economy, and replace that with nuclear plants. If solar power also has a carbon footprint and it's not the most efficient renewable energy, then we can rely on the nuclear option. Of course, nuclear energy can't be the only energy option. Any country will have an energy basket and a certain allocation for different sources of energy. You need to diversify your energy sources to guarantee your energy security. You should never put all your eggs in one basket and depend just on one form of energy. So India also is in the process of diversifying its energy basket. There will be some reliance on thermal power, some dependency on solar power, wind, geothermal, etc. But a significant share has to come from nuclear source. As of now, this is very less in India. Hardly around 1.6% of our total energy output is coming from nuclear sources. This is way below the global average. We can easily scale this up to 10 or even 15 or up to 20% of our energy basket in the coming decades. Right? So there is great potential in India to exploit nuclear energy. So now it's about raising the funds, raising the money that is required, ensuring the safety of these programs. So in India, recently we reached a landmark milestone with regard to our 3-stage nuclear program. Just a few days back, Prime Minister Modi witnessed the core loading event at Kalpakkam in Tamil Nadu, where a fast breeder reactor was operationalized by India. A prototype fast breeder reactor has been operationalized, which marks the beginning of India's 2nd stage of its 3-stage nuclear program. The beauty of the 2nd stage of the nuclear program is that these fast breeder reactors, they not only generate power, they also produce the fuel in order to create a self-sustaining nuclear cycle. This could take us towards the 3rd stage of our nuclear program, where we can rely on the large thorium reserves India has in its monzite sands present in the coastal areas to create a self-sustaining fuel cycle in the country. So this is a landmark event. We are looking to raise more investments, more capital, and the Modi government itself has set an ambitious target to increase nuclear capacity by at least 3 times by 2031-32. As of now, around 7,000 odd megawatts is being produced. We want to triple this to around 22,000 megawatts in the next 7 to 8 years. We are looking to raise significant capital of around $26 billion, and we are looking to attract private investments into the sector. With the rising popularity of small modular reactors and increased nuclear safety, this could very well become a great opportunity for India. So that is why India's participation in the Nuclear Energy Summit and India's adoption of the Nuclear Energy Declaration is going to be very, very significant. So please make a note of all these points that we have discussed. It will help you both in your prelims and mains. It's been a comprehensive, detailed discussion. You don't need anything else beyond this. So I hope you have understood everything. Now, before we take up the next article, there's a small announcement about the free special classes that we are running on the Unacademy app. You can see the schedule for today. These are the classes lined up. In the morning at 7 a.m., we already had a NCERT fundamental series on geography by Mukesh Sir. In the afternoon at 1 p.m., I'll be continuing the IR series on the role of prime ministers in shaping Indian foreign policy. And today we will be discussing the contribution of IK Gujral to India's foreign policy. Then tonight at 8 p.m., Asta ma'am will be taking a special current affairs session to help you revise a few MCQs. So do attend these classes live, and the session links are provided in the video description below. Let's look at page number 8, where we have two columns related to water crisis and water conservation. Because today, the 22nd of March, is celebrated and marked as the World Water Day. It's a UN initiative. Since 1993, the UN has been celebrating the 22nd of March every year as World Water Day to highlight the importance of water as a critical resource. This day is used by governments, by even environmental organizations and UN organizations to promote the awareness regarding water conservation, efficient water management, and water conservation. So in this regard, the Hindu carries two important columns. Two special articles are presented in this page. So let's club both the articles together and have a discussion on what the writers are talking about. The first column is written by an expert in the domain. The second article is written by the UNESCO representative in India. So I'll be merging both the articles and having one common discussion because both topics are related to each other. See, not just in India, but around the world, we are currently witnessing a major water crisis. If you look at, let's say, Bengaluru and other cities in India, if you look at states like Karnataka, currently in this summer season, they're already going through a significant water crisis. A major water crisis has hit multiple cities and states in India, and this is the state with many other cities and countries as well. As climate change becomes more intense, right, as global temperatures continue to rise, it's leading to irreversible changes as far as the global weather patterns are concerned. Several regions are hit by very intense drought conditions. Certain regions are getting affected by extreme weather events, leading to more disasters. So this is directly affecting rainfall, water availability, and hence it becomes very important to focus on efficient water management. It's not that we don't have enough water. There is enough water. Problem is in how we manage and utilize the water that we have. We are used to over-exploiting our water resources. We are used to polluting and destroying our water resources. That is where the problem lies. Water is indeed a scarce resource because not all the water available is potable. It's not safe for it's not safe enough for consumption, for human consumption, right? To ensure that the water which is available is readily available for all the required purposes, from agriculture to industrial usage to drinking to cleaning, we need to ensure that we protect our water sources. We protect them from encroachment. We protect them from over-exploitation, from pollution, and promote the safe and efficient, sustainable usage of this precious resource. Now, I'll present some very important data. According to the World Resources Institute, 17 countries in the world are facing extreme levels of water stress. This is a very important point. According to the World Resources Institute report, 17 countries are facing extreme high levels of stress because of water shortage. So essentially, the report says that due to these high levels of water stress, it could lead to wars, conflicts, and affect peace and stability in a region. In fact, many experts argue that future wars will be fought over water because there are many transboundary rivers shared between multiple countries. If two states in India can fight over water, take the Kaveri water dispute for example, right? Imagine what happens when it comes to transboundary rivers between 2 or 3 countries which are sharing the water resource. So during periods of water shortage and during such water crisis periods, this could easily escalate into a bigger conflict. It could lead to more destabilization, even civil wars, and affect peace and stability in the world. So there is a direct societal risk and a global security risk as a result of the looming water crisis. If 17 countries are under extremely high level of water stress, imagine how many more countries might be facing significant levels of water stress. So India is no different. In India, water availability has been significantly compromised over the years. Studies have shown that water availability in India is pretty low. It has drastically gone down over the decades, and it's expected to decline even further by 2050. If you look at the data presented here, it clearly shows that India is also a water-stressed country. If not extreme levels of water stress, as per the World Resources Institute, we are at least going through a water stress situation where in certain parts of the country, there is a shortage of availability of water. The water available for human consumption has declined significantly. And of course, this affects the environment as well. If you're not taking care of the ecological flow, which is needed for maintaining basic ecological environmental activities, right? And if there isn't enough water for human consumption as well, then that is a worst case scenario. And there are several regions in India where water availability has gone down, right? It's not able to meet human demand, and it's not able to meet the ecological demand for natural water flow as well. The main concern here is encroachment, destruction of local water bodies, ponds, lakes, etc. Right? These are reservoirs of water for the nearby region. But what have we done as a result of unplanned urbanization, as a result of unplanned haphazard development, and due to the nexus between the real estate construction industry and the politicians and the government authorities, we have blatantly carried out illegal construction, destroyed all the catchment areas, the drainage channels, built residential areas, complexes and malls on lake and riverbeds, right? So what do you expect will happen? Obviously, the destruction of the natural drainage basin and the catchment areas and the water bodies will come back to affect us. We have severely polluted our water bodies. We have clogged all the water channels, the natural water channels that were present. We have dumped waste unscientifically, even hazardous waste, leading to significant pollution of our water bodies. We have overexploited the groundwater table. So the end result is that you will face a water stress situation, and right now, certain parts of India, they are facing a water stress situation. If not extreme levels of water stress, at least water stress is being noticed in several parts of the country, particularly during the summer months. So this rings alarm bells for India. This should ring alarm bells for the rest of the world as well. In India, if you look at water usage, if you look at the water usage pattern, 72% of water which is lifted for human consumption is used for irrigation, for agriculture. That shows the extent of dependency of our rural agricultural sector on water. Around 16% of available water is withdrawn by municipalities, city corporations and local bodies to supply water for households and for other buildings for regular consumption, for day-to-day consumption. The remaining 12% is used for industrial usage. So this is the water distribution pattern or the usage pattern in India. So it shows how critical water is for agriculture and industrial development and also for human survival. So this is where it becomes important to focus on efficient and sustainable water management practices and promote awareness about water conservation. The government of India does have plenty of schemes and programs in this regard. For example, we have the Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana that focuses on irrigation and as well as on water management and water conservation. We also have Atal Bhujal Yojana that focuses on efficient usage of groundwater. It prioritizes the recharge of the groundwater table because due to concretization of cities, there is no space available for water to percolate to the groundwater table. And due to unplanned rapid urbanization, groundwater table has been overexploited and we have almost exhausted some of our underground water resources. The underground aquifers are almost running dry. They're almost running dry in several cities in the country. In fact, there is a Niti Aayog report which presents a very alarming picture that by 2040, several Indian cities might exhaust their underground aquifers and groundwater table. So this represents a worst case scenario for a country like India, that too with India's population size. So it's very important to focus on efficient watershed management practices. Watershed management refers to the comprehensive management of the catchment area in a particular drainage basin. Let's say you take the Kaveri River Basin or the Ganga River Basin. It will have many tributaries which are in turn connected to many canals, rivers, lakes, ponds, etc. Right? There's an entire catchment area in the drainage basin. So how will you manage the flow of water throughout that drainage basin, in that entire catchment area? How will you build dams, embankments, reservoirs, and how will you channel the flow of water? How will you conserve, store water and use it over a period of time? This entire practice is called watershed management. So this has to be highly efficient. There should not be any water wastage. There should not be any high risk to the environment as well. The ecological flow has to be maintained while meeting the human needs. We have Mission Amrit Sarovar, focused on pond conservation in our villages. It's a dedicated government mission focused on rejuvenating the ponds at the village level, which is a vital source for drinking water and even for irrigation. So the answers have to be made available locally. Local water supply is critical. You can't provide piped water over hundreds of kilometers. You take the example of Bengaluru itself. For most of the city, water is being drawn from the Kaveri River, which is a good 110, 120 kilometers away, right? So this is never sustainable. Water should be met locally from local lakes, rivers and ponds. And for that, you need to conserve, protect your water bodies. You need efficient watershed management practices. You should conserve water, and programs like Jal Shakti Abhiyan could actually help us achieve that. Through Jal Shakti Abhiyan, India is trying to provide piped water connection for all the households in the country, and even this focuses on efficient water management and water conservation. But one important solution is rainwater harvesting and mandatory groundwater recharge in every house and in every building. Several local bodies have already made it mandatory for certain types of residential buildings and commercial buildings. They must have rainwater harvesting facilities. They must invest in groundwater recharge facilities. This alone will take care of the local water needs. So this is an efficient method of water conservation, right? So mainstreaming these approaches is going to be critical. Now, if you look at the role of UNESCO, if you look at the second column, right, which is written by UNESCO's representative in India, he is talking about the same issues, and he is highlighting the future concerns with regard to sharing of transboundary rivers. So here the writer is examining the role of UNESCO, how it can help in international cooperation between different countries that are sharing rivers between them. For example, we share the Indus River Basin with Pakistan, and we have an Indus Water Treaty that defines the water sharing arrangement between India and Pakistan. There are multiple rivers that we share with Nepal, right? The Ganga and its tributaries. It's a shared resource between India and Nepal. And we share the same with Bangladesh as well. And Brahmaputra is shared between China, India and Bangladesh. So like this, we have plenty of transboundary rivers, and with Bangladesh alone, there are almost 53, 54 transboundary rivers. So if the water crisis increases, and especially due to climate change, if there is greater water shortage in the coming years, sharing of transboundary rivers could become a flashpoint. It could become a point of conflict, which could easily turn to wars and bigger disputes and conflicts between different countries. So that is why it is important to promote international cooperation right from today as far as sharing of transboundary rivers are concerned. So here the writer is presenting some important data again, which could be very important not just for environment ecology, even for international relations. According to the UNESCO representative, the UN World Water Development Report that was published by UNESCO as part of UN Water, it points out that out of the 194 member states of UNESCO and 12 associate members, 153 countries have transboundary rivers. This is a very, very important statistic. See, there is a inter-country initiative, inter-agency and inter-country initiative for coordinating over water management and water sharing at the UN called UN Water. It's a dedicated UN initiative that brings multiple UN agencies together along with several UN members to focus on water management and water conservation. So as part of this UN Water initiative, the UN World Water Development Report is brought out by UNESCO. So this report brings out a very important fact that out of its 194 members and 12 associate members, 153 countries are transboundary countries, meaning they have transboundary rivers. They share water with other countries. If you take the overall fresh water available, 60% of the water resource is transboundary in nature. So that again highlights the importance of transboundary water sharing and why international cooperation is needed. Out of these 153 countries, which have transboundary rivers passing through their countries, only 24 of them have a 100% water sharing agreement. Like Indus Water Treaty between India and Pakistan. But we don't have any water sharing treaty with China with regard to Yarlung Tsangpo and Brahmaputra. We have signed few water sharing agreements with Bangladesh, right? But the Teesta water dispute has not been settled. We still don't have a water sharing agreement over Teesta River, and it remains a dispute between India and Bangladesh. But however, we have the Faraka agreement that deals with sharing of part of the Ganga River, right? We have another agreement with regard to the Kushiara River that was recently signed. Kushiara is one of the branches of the Barak River that flows from northeast India to Bangladesh. And recently, India-Bangladesh signed a water sharing agreement to share the waters of Kushiara River. So we do have few water sharing agreements, but with majority of the rivers, there is no water sharing agreement, either with Bangladesh or China or Nepal or even with Pakistan, right? Apart from these few agreements we don't have agreements covering every other water resource that we share with our neighboring countries. So out of the 153 countries in the world which have transboundary rivers, only 24 of them have a 100% cooperation agreement. These agreements are critical because they provide for stability. They provide for a clear distribution of the available water resource, and countries will be expected to uphold them and abide them as part of international law and their global commitments. This provides more clarity and avoids disputes and conflicts. Problem is, when you don't have these agreements, the downstream countries or the lower riparian countries will always be worried and concerned about what upper riparian countries are going to do. If you take Yarlung Tsangpo and Brahmaputra, for example, India and Bangladesh are constantly worried as to how China is going to utilize the waters as an upstream country, as an upper riparian. So several Chinese dams and water diversion projects in the upper reaches of Yarlung Tsangpo is a major concern for India. We look at this not just from a water resource perspective, we look at this from a strategic security angle as well. So the prediction is absolutely right. Tomorrow, if there is a major water crisis and if countries don't share water with their neighbors, that could be a perfect reason for the start of wars and conflicts, right? So it's very, very important to achieve international cooperation given that climate change is a reality. We need to prepare. We need to focus on mitigation, adaptation measures, and there should be cooperation agreements on water sharing between these transboundary countries, between these countries that have transboundary rivers, right? So there are only 24 countries that have these 100% sharing agreements, but we need to increase the coverage because this is part of the UN goal under Sustainable Development Goals. If you look at SDG goals, if you look at goal number 6, SDG 6 deals with clean water and sanitation. It urges all the countries to work towards providing clean drinking water and ensuring that there is clean hygienic and sanitation services available. So under this goal, you have Target 5 Sub-Target 2, SDG 6.5.2, which calls for transboundary cooperation between interstate river countries. Between countries where there are transboundary rivers, the SDG target 6.5.2 It's urging the UN members to achieve transboundary river and water sharing cooperation. So this is a mandate of the Sustainable Development Goals as well. So as the writer is saying, the countries need to step up. They need to work under the ambit of the UN, negotiate with each other and establish these water sharing agreements. So that is what we take away from these two important columns that deals with water crisis and water management. Now coming to the last big article, on page number 10, we have an update with regard to Pakistan-Afghanistan relations. There's something dramatic which has happened in the last few days. A few days ago, there was a major terror attack in Pakistan in the tribal region in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, right, which is one of the major provinces of Pakistan. So in the tribal belt along the Afghan border, there was a terror attack where many Pakistanis were killed, including few Pakistani police and security officials. This terror attack has been attributed to the TTP, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, also called Pakistan Taliban. So this is a branch of Taliban operating in Pakistan but takes shelter in Afghanistan. Pakistan has been alleging that the Afghan government, ruled by Afghan Taliban right now, has been sheltering and supporting the Pakistan Taliban. So this has become a major dispute between the Pakistani military leadership and Afghan Taliban government. So following this terror attack, Pakistan retaliated by using its air force to conduct airstrikes in Afghan territory. Now, this is the second such incident which has happened here following the Iran-Pakistan clashes that happened a few weeks ago. If you remember, we had discussed how Iran had fired missiles into Pakistan and how Pakistan retaliated by launching missiles into Iran, right? So now there has been a direct breach of Afghan sovereignty by Pakistan, where Pakistani Air Force has bombed Paktika over here and Khost and Kunar regions. These three specific locations along the border have been targeted by Pakistani Air Force in targeted airstrikes, as Pakistan says that these are the bases of the TTP. This is where Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan apparently has a strong base from where it targets Pakistan. So let's explore this issue in slight detail. Let's understand what's happening between these two countries and how this could have an impact on India. India, of course, closely watches all these developments because whatever happens between Pakistan and Afghanistan is of critical importance for India. So let's begin with the basics. Now, can you see the map here? You can see Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India. This boundary line between Afghanistan and Pakistan, popularly called the Af-Pak border. It's also called the Durand line, which was drawn by the Durand Commission following the Anglo-Afghan wars of 1800s, through which the British were thrown out of Afghanistan, right? Finally, boundaries were established between British Indian Empire and Afghanistan. And this British-era boundary drawn by the Durand Commission is called the Durand line, which today has become the boundary between Afghanistan and Pakistan. So in this border area, you find a native ethnic community called the Pashtuns. The Pashtuns are the native ethnic community of Afghanistan, primarily found in southern and eastern parts of Afghanistan. Pashtuns are also found in Pakistan as well, in the border areas. This is the Balochistan region of Pakistan, from here all the way till Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. This is the tribal belt. Let me show you this map, which is a little more clear. So here you can see the Durand line, or the Af-Pak border, right? So around Kandahar, Helmand, the Khost province, this entire region is a Pashtun belt. It's a Pashtun-dominated belt. Pashtuns are found over here as well, in Pakistan. See, this is Quetta, the capital of Balochistan province, right? So all across this region, Pashtun community has a strong presence, particularly in this belt, the tribal belt. What you're seeing here is the KP region, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province of Pakistan. All right? This area historically was called Northwest Frontier Province, NWFP, during British era. Later, it came to be known as FATA, Federally Administered Tribal Areas, where Pakistan's central government was directly administering some of the tribal areas present here along the Afghanistan region. This region I'm referring to is nothing but Waziristan. You have North and South Waziristan, which is a major tribal belt that stretches across the Durand line, present both in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Today, there is no Fatah. Fatah has been merged with Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. This whole region today is the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, which also includes major cities like Peshawar, which is very close to the Afghan border. Now, this whole belt that you're seeing here is a hub of radicalism and extremism. Since 1979, Pakistan has played a direct role in radicalizing this entire Pashtun belt. Pakistan's army and its intelligence agency, the ISI, they played a direct role in supporting and raising the Afghan Mujahideen, which was mainly made up of the Pashtun community. In 1979, Soviet Union had invaded Afghanistan and occupied Afghanistan after toppling the communist government in Afghanistan. This was a result of the Cold War rivalry between Soviet Union and the US. The Soviet Union was worried that in its neighboring country, American influence was spreading. And Soviet forces invaded the country throughout the Afghan government and tried occupying the country for a while. So US saw this as an opportunity during the Cold War, and it waged a covert proxy war against Soviet Union. So US and its intelligence agencies, led by the CIA, they worked with Pakistan's ISI, along with few other countries, to provide funds, weapons, and training to the native Pashtun community to create an insurgency. Right? They raised the Mujahideen, the Afghan Mujahideen, and turned this into a religious war. So the Afghan Mujahideen would wage an insurgent war against the occupying Soviet forces, and throughout this decade, from 1979 to 1989, Pakistan got all the support from US and other countries to create a terror factory, a terror ecosystem all along the Durand line. So especially here along the Baloch and Kandahar borders over here, and as well as in the tribal belt, multiple terror factories were set up, terror training camps were set up, right? So since then, Pakistan has had a lot of control over Afghan politics. It has controlled Afghan Mujahideen as well. And eventually, this Afghan Mujahideen gave birth to the Taliban. After Soviet forces were defeated by 1989, Soviet forces retreated from here after losing to the Mujahideen insurgency. So as Afghan Mujahideen won the conflict, a civil war broke out, a power struggle broke out in Afghanistan, and Pakistan was trying to install a pro-Pakistan government. And in the meanwhile, some of the young radical leaders of the Mujahideen, they broke out and established Taliban in Kandahar. Taliban is this radical extremist political organization which has been involved in insurgency and terrorism. And its goal is to throw out these governments, capture the territory, to establish an Islamic state and to impose a rigid version of its Sharia law. So there are two branches of this Taliban. One is the Afghan Taliban. Afghan Taliban has always been largely controlled by Pakistan. Pakistan's army and ISI have conveniently used their influence on Afghan Taliban to even breed anti-India terror groups in the same region. The same terrorist infrastructure was used by Pakistan. It diverted the same funds and weapons that it received from US and other countries to sponsor Afghan Mujahideen and diverted them towards Khalistan terror groups and Kashmir-centric insurgent and terror groups. So Pakistan realized that as long as it has control over Afghan Taliban, it can use this region, the Afpak border region, for its so-called strategic depth, and use this for anti-India terror activities, to destabilize India, to target India. So this has been a problem that we have been dealing with since 1980s, right? So in 1996, when Afghan Taliban captured power, it threw out the Afghan government, captured power, and formed an Islamic emirate. The Taliban came to power and established a government. So then, Pakistan was very influential as it had leverage and influence on the Afghan Taliban. So several anti-India groups were nurtured during this period, and when other global terror groups established in Afghanistan like Al-Qaeda, they were all connected with anti-India terror groups as well, like Jaish-e-Mohammed, Hizbul Mujahideen, Lashkar-e-Toiba. All these India-centric terror groups bred by Pakistan were linked with Afghan Taliban and Al-Qaeda. This connection was created by Pakistan. So this whole region has been a concern for India for many decades. So now some differences have come up between Pakistan's military intelligence leadership and the Afghan Taliban. Previously, Afghan Taliban was like a puppet, listening to the Pakistani army and ISI, doing what they wanted, breeding anti-India terror groups, supporting them, encouraging them. But in the recent years, a major divide has come up between them, a difference has come up between them. Because there is another faction of the Taliban, which is called Pakistan Taliban, also called the TTP, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. So by early 2000, a new branch of Taliban was established by some of the radical Pashtun Taliban elements present on the Pakistani side. If you go back and look at the map, you will see that the Pashtun areas, as I explained, extend towards Pakistan as well. So this is the hub of Taliban. This is the major hub where Taliban has a lot of support from the local Pashtun community. So just like there is an Afghan Taliban which has captured power in Afghanistan, there has been a new outfit that was formed a few years ago called the TTP, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. Its end goal is to throw out the Pakistani state itself. The goal of TTP is to throw out the Pakistani government, throw out the civilian government, throw out the army and ISI, and capture power just like Afghan Taliban has done in Afghanistan. Right? Afghan Taliban has recaptured power in 2021 after US forces retreated. Following a peace deal between US and Taliban, Afghan Taliban captured power by throwing out the Afghan government. So since then, Afghan Taliban has formed the Afghan government and it has again reimposed its rigid laws and rules, and it's turning the country into an Islamic state. Now the concern here is that Afghan Taliban has connections with Pakistan Taliban. The TTP is of course connected. They are like two brother organizations. Now TTP was posing a threat to Pakistan, but Pakistan has always been close to Afghan Taliban. So this became the dilemma. The TTP kept on carrying out many attacks. A few years ago, you might have heard about a deadly attack in Peshawar, right, in the same tribal belt that I was discussing, where a school was targeted. More than 150 children were killed. This brutal attack was carried out by this group, the TTP, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. So Pakistan has been trying to target the TTP from many years, and it expects Afghan Taliban to cooperate. It requires the support of Afghan Taliban because it controls large parts of these areas, and it wants to use its influence to pressurize the TTP and to cut off the TTP. So after Afghan Taliban came to power in 2021, a deal had been brokered. A deal had been struck in 2021 by the Afghan Taliban government. Afghan Taliban, which had formed the government, acted as a mediator between the Pakistani military leadership that represents the Pakistani state and the TTP or Pakistan Taliban. The deal was that TTP will no longer attack Pakistan. It will not attack Pakistani army and Pakistani targets. And in return, Pakistan also will not retaliate against the TTP. This was the deal that was brokered. But however, 1 year later, in 2022, the deal was broken by the TTP. Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan broke this agreement. It broke the ceasefire because it sensed an opportunity. It saw that Pakistan's economy is collapsing. There is a constant political crisis going on in the country. Pakistan is at its weakest. So TTP is trying to exploit that opportunity, and it has stepped up its attacks over the last 1.5 to 2 years. So over this period, a lot of attacks have been carried out by the TTP, and as a result, the Pakistani army and ISI, they are furious about what the TTP is doing. So they expect Afghan Taliban government to act, and they are holding Afghan Taliban government responsible as it is not acting against the TTP. So this has created a major divide between the two previous fronts. At one point, they were hand in hand together to target India. But now, between them, there is a major divide, a rupture which has come up. Because Afghan Taliban, in a way, has sheltered its brother organization, the TTP. On the other side of the border, in the tribal belt and as well as in Kandahar, TTP has been given a base where its terrorists can freely operate under the protection of Afghan Taliban government. As I told you, both are Pashtuns from the same region. They don't even respect the Durand line. The Pashtuns here, they don't see Durand line as the boundary. They don't have any respect for the Afpak border. They want to unite all these areas, throw out these governments and form an Islamic state. So the relations between Afghan Taliban and Pakistan Taliban has become very good. Reports indicate that Afghan Taliban government is now sheltering Pakistan Taliban, the TTP, allowing it to operate freely and even carry out attacks against Pakistan. So that is why Pakistan is furious, and it has carried out many attacks in the past as well. In the last 1 year, Pakistani army and its special forces and its air force have carried out few raids and strikes into Afghan territory. So this is the latest airstrike. So obviously this is a violation of Afghan sovereignty. Right? Pakistani forces are entering Afghan territory and Afghan airspace and conducting these strikes, which can be treated as an act of war. And that is why the Afghan Taliban government is furious at Pakistan. So divisions between them is increasing. And this might very well create an opportunity for India. Pakistan has always alleged that India was sponsoring TTP without any evidence. From many years, Pakistan's story has been that India's RAW has been involved in sponsoring TTP. But it has never brought up any credible evidence to indicate that, nor there is any proof to show that India is involved in backing TTP. But however, the current rupture between Pakistan's army and ISI and Afghan government is a great opportunity for India. Previously, we had treated Afghan Taliban as a terrorist group. We had boycotted Afghan Taliban. We never engaged with the Taliban officially. But now, after coming to power in 2021, we have reached out to the Taliban. Just like other countries, like US, Russia, China, Iran, they've all struck deals with Afghan Taliban government. So India should not be left behind because we have made some big investments in Afghanistan. We have invested almost $3 billion when Afghan civilian government was in place. Afghanistan is crucial to connect with Central Asia. It can help improve our ties with Iran as well. And more importantly, good relations with the Taliban could help counter terrorism. Since the Taliban government wants recognition, right? In the future, India might think about this. India might give recognition. And in return, we can get a guarantee from the Taliban to protect Indian interests, to ensure Pakistan doesn't use Afghan territory and the border areas to support terrorist organizations against India. So this could very well become an opportunity, and that is why this is a very, very big development. Previously, Taliban was a puppet of the army and the ISI. It was blindly following their orders and encouraging anti-India terror activities. Now a major divide has come up between them because it's supporting Pakistan Taliban, sheltering them, and the TTP is targeting Pakistan. So given that Pakistan has attacked Afghanistan repeatedly, the Taliban government is not happy with it. Plus, India has started reaching out in the last few months. Slowly, relations are developing. If we go ahead and establish a relationship and maybe even recognize the Taliban regime, that might work in India's interest to pull Taliban away from Pakistan and protect India's security interests. So that is why this is a big, big development from this region. So this completes my detailed discussion of all the big articles. Now let's take a quick look at the smaller articles in the newspaper. On page 14, there's an article referring to a cooperation agreement signed between the CBI and Europol. Just like you have Interpol, which promotes international police cooperation amongst police and law enforcement agencies, there is a Europol as well for European region. It's part of European Union. It stands for European Union Agency for Law Enforcement Cooperation. So all EU members have come together to establish Europol, where their law enforcement and police agencies work together to share information, to assist each other, to tackle all forms of organized crime and criminal activities. Is that clear? In India, CBI is one such law enforcement agency that deals with organized crime and other criminal activities, which might even have connections with terrorism. Because organized crime and terrorism are closely interlinked. They are closely connected. So if you look at Interpol, for example, it creates a global platform where police law enforcement agencies from around the world can cooperate, share information, and request assistance to crack down on organized crime. So from India, the designated liaison agency is the CBI. CBI is the nodal agency in India to coordinate with Interpol. Let's say a particular state police, they want to raise a red corner notice against a suspect. They want Interpol to issue a red corner notice. Because under Interpol, you have this color-coded notice system where you can request support from other law enforcement agencies. So any such request from India has to go through CBI. Let's say NIA wants to raise a red corner notice against a terrorist who's hiding in some other country. NIA can't directly approach Interpol, or a state police organization can't approach Interpol. They have to go through CBI, because CBI is the liaison agency, the nodal agency to coordinate with Interpol. Similarly, we have signed a deal with Europol right now to promote law enforcement cooperation between India and EU. This is a very big development. This will help us to share information, request assistance, and even give assistance to tackle all forms of organized crime, including its links with terrorism. So be it drugs trafficking, arms trafficking, human trafficking, wildlife trafficking and smuggling, all these criminal activities, including cyber crimes, they could all be effectively tackled with the help of Europol and European law enforcement agencies. And this could even help in counter-terrorism because of the direct connections that exist between these organized criminal activities and terrorist activities. So that is the big development reported over here. So please note down that Europol was established in 1998 and it is headquartered at The Hague in Netherlands. It's headquartered in the city of Hague in Netherlands. All these facts are important. Now, can you find out where Interpol is headquartered? Can you let me know in the comments where Interpol is headquartered, in which city, which country, and what are the color notices, the color-coded notices that are issued by Interpol? Please read about these 2 points. That's an assignment for you. Mention that in the comment section. Next, on the same page, we have a very important article related to a critically endangered bird, the great Indian bustard. Can you see this image over here? It's a large bird with very large wingspan, and traditionally, historically, it was found in the arid, semi-arid grassland region of India. That is Rajasthan, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh belt, Gujarat, interior Maharashtra, Karnataka, and Telangana, Andhra Pradesh belt. In the arid, semi-arid regions of western and southern India, especially where you have grasslands, that is where we found this. We used to find this large bird called the great Indian bustard. It is endemic to this region. You can't find this anywhere in the world. And unfortunately, its population has declined drastically. Today, there are hardly few hundred birds which are alive, which are left behind in Rajasthan and Gujarat. Parts of Rajasthan and Gujarat is the last remaining habitat of the great Indian bustard. Hardly around 100 odd birds are left, and right now they are on the brink of extinction. Their species has been almost destroyed due to hunting, poaching, and habitat destruction, right? So now they are facing a major threat due to windmills and power cables, because very often these birds get entangled in these projects. And if you've been to this part of Rajasthan and Gujarat, right, you know that there are many high tension power cables and windmills located over here. And this represents a major threat for the very survival of the species. According to IUCN, their numbers are less than 250. According to latest reports, it's somewhere in the range of 150 to 200, not more than that. So Supreme Court of India is directly looking into the conservation of Great Indian Bustard. There is a case in front of the Supreme Court calling for restrictions on these power projects and windmill projects to protect this bird species. It has been given the highest degree of protection. Under Wildlife Protection Act, it's under Schedule 1. Under CITES Convention, it's under Appendix 1. Understood? So Supreme Court of India, which is looking into the conservation of the bird species, it has set up an expert committee to suggest whether the power lines could be altered, whether the power cables could be taken underground so that it's no longer a threat to the Great Indian Bustard. All right, it's also examining the viability of the windmills present, which poses a direct threat to the birds. So this is something you should be aware of. Next, on the same page, we have another environment-related article that refers to the plastic waste management rules, which was amended and notified recently by the Environment Ministry. With regard to plastic waste, there is a separate set of waste management rules that has been notified by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. This was amended recently, and a very big change has been done with regard to biodegradable plastics. See, as you know, plastics, they don't degrade or decompose easily. They can remain in the environment for hundreds of years, right? There are certain types of plastic polymers which can remain in the environment for even 1,000+ years without undergoing degradation or decomposition. Plus, as we know, plastics break down into microplastics, into very small, minute plastic pieces that can enter water systems and enter the food chain, and it can enter organisms, including human beings, causing a wide variety of diseases and disorders. Right now, microplastics are a big environmental threat, especially for marine organisms. Right? And microplastic presence has been detected in human bodies as well, because it has already entered the food chain, it has entered the bloodstreams. So, when it comes to plastic management, there is a type of plastic which is promoted as more environment friendly. You might have heard about biodegradable plastics. And you also have one more type of plastic called compostable plastic. These are two types of plastics which are promoted in the industry as more friendly to the environment. One is your biodegradable plastic, and second is compostable plastic. Now, since they are claimed to be more environment friendly, the producers of these plastics, they were escaping the rules of plastic waste management. Right? The previous rules would only cover the regular plastics which are environmentally hazardous. But by claiming that plastic is biodegradable or compostable, some of the plastic producers and consumers were getting away through the regulatory framework that is in place. Now, if you look at biodegradable plastic, it is coated with a certain material which makes it naturally degradable. Because of the unique process through which it is manufactured, it's put through a chemical treatment, right? So when you dispose this plastic, it is supposed to break down, degrade, and eventually decompose over a period of time. But there is no guarantee, there's no clarity as to how exactly or when exactly the degradation will happen. Companies, manufacturers might claim that it's biodegradable, but there is no established scientific data to show that they are truly biodegradable. And they might contribute to microplastics, since they will take many decades, many years to break down, right? In the meantime, it could release microplastics, which is still a big contamination. If you look at compostable plastics, which is another category of so-called environment-friendly plastic, it is supposed to be compostable, which means it can be degraded, but it requires industrial level waste management. It requires large waste management factories or plants, either by the municipal bodies or by the industries, to break down the compostable plastic and degrade it. So compostable plastics as well, before they are scientifically degraded and broken down, they might contribute to microplastics. So they're not truly environment friendly as they claim. The producers might claim that this is environment friendly and eventually they'll degrade, but it's not as they claim. Because biodegradable plastics might continue releasing microplastics, they may not degrade as well. Compostable plastics will require large industrial municipal waste management. Otherwise, even this can't undergo decomposition. So to bring them as well under the strict purview of the plastic waste management rules, the rules were amended and a caveat has been added. The caveat is that if any plastic is contributing to microplastics, they will come under the purview of these rules. Doesn't matter whether it's biodegradable or whether producers are claiming that it is compostable. Whatever is their claim, irrespective of that, if it can contribute to microplastics, then every type of plastic gets covered under the waste management rules. Essentially, the definition of plastic has been expanded. So by bringing the caveat of microplastics, even the so-called biodegradable compostable plastics are getting included, which places a bigger responsibility on the producers, the consumers, to deal with this plastic waste in a scientific manner. Is that clear? So that is the big change which has been done. Coming to the last article on page 16. The article is mentioning a regional organization called the Arab League, which has praised India's position on Palestine. As we have discussed in previous sessions, India has consistently supported the two-state solution, and we have always backed the right of Palestine to form a country of its own. Right? Irrespective of India's close relations with Israel, we have stood firm on the Palestinian position, and even though governments have changed in India, over the decades, India has remained consistent in its support for the Palestinian cause. Right? So this position of India on the two-state solution has been appreciated by Arab League. So the question is, what is Arab League? You can expect prelims questions here. Recently, Arab League was in the news because one of its members, which had been removed from the group, that is Syria, was readmitted following a peace deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran. China mediated a peace deal and helped in re-establishing relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran, which are the major rivals of West Asia. Following this, Saudi and Iran agreed to reduce support for some of the civil wars that they were sponsoring, and Syria, as a result, was supposed to be brought back and included because it had been thrown out when a civil war broke out here in 2011. The civil war in Syria was largely sponsored, supported by Saudi and few other Sunni powers along with US, because they were trying to target Syria, which is an ally of Iran. So, given the peace between Saudi and Iran, which was struck by China, it was reported that both Saudi and Iran will withdraw the support for all the civil wars going on. Like Iran was backing the Houthi rebels in Yemen to target Saudi interests. Right? If Saudi was sponsoring civil war in Syria to target Iranian interests, Iran was backing the Houthi rebels in Yemen to target Saudi interests. So both struck a deal that they will withdraw the support for these civil wars, and they will ensure that Syria is brought back into Arab League. So that's why the group was in news. So now it's again in news for praising India for its position on Palestine. So please go through the basic facts about Arab League. It represents the Arab countries. There are around 22 countries, including Palestine. Palestine is given the status of a country here, and some of the major Arab countries in Middle East and Africa are part of it. So there are a few North African countries, East African countries as well, and West Asian countries, which are part of the Arab League. It was founded in 1945, and it's headquartered in Cairo, Egypt. Its goal is to promote close relations and coordination between all the Arab states, right? All the predominantly Muslim states present here, which includes Mauritania, Algeria, Libya, Egypt, includes Saudi Arabia, Oman, even Somalia, right? All these countries are part of this organization, including Palestine. So that is why the Arab League becomes important, because India does have good relations with the Arab League. So this concludes my discussion for today. Please take a look at the mains questions. You can make a note of this or take a screenshot so you can use them for your answer writing practice. So that is it for today. I hope you guys have understood everything. Do let me know what you think in the comments. If you liked it, press the like button, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That is it. I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching.